Hello, my Steel City family. Welcome to SCM, MCS, Mysterious Crime Stories. Welcome back for another episode. I'm your host, T-Rex. And before I get started, I would like to first apologize for the noises you may hear. We have some electrical utility workers outside the studio today, so I apologize for that. Today's story focuses around Dorothy Jane Scott, who lived in Stanton, California with her aunt. Beginning in early 1980, Dorothy, a single mother of a 4-year-old named Sean, began receiving threatening calls at her aunt's home. At times, the caller was fawning, professing his love for Dorothy, making romantic overtures. Other than that, he was vitriolic and threatening. He would tell Dorothy things like he was going to harm her and do things to her in unspeakable ways. He would say, "When I get you alone, I'll cut you up into tiny bits." And he also told her that no one would ever find her. It wasn't the first call that Dorothy would receive from the unidentified caller. Someone whose voice seemed recognizable, but Dorothy could not quite place it. The caller often made it clear that he was watching Dorothy, recounting her day-to-day life and activities. In one instance, he told her to go outside because he had something for her. When she went to her car, she found a single, dead, long-stem rose placed on her windshield. The calls unsettled Scott and her family, but they weren't quite sure what to do about it, so the calls went unreported. Then on the night of May 28, 1980, 32-year-old Scott dropped off her son with her parents in Anaheim so that she could attend a staff meeting at her job. During the meeting, she noticed that a coworker wasn't feeling well, so she offered to drive him to the hospital. The coworker, Conrad Bostrone, took Dorothy up on her offer, and she, Dorothy, and another coworker, Pam Hurd, drove Conrad to a local hospital. On the way, Dorothy stopped at her parents' house just to check up on her son. While she was there, she switched from a black scarf that she was wearing into a red one. At the hospital, it was determined that Conrad was bitten by a black widow spider. He was treated while Scott and Hurd waited in the waiting room. According to Pam, Scott never left her side. When Boston was released, Scott went outside to the hospital parking lot while Hurd and Bostrone picked up prescriptions. When Scott didn't return right away, her two co-workers went out to the parking lot, and there they saw Dorothy's car speeding away. The headlights were blinding them, so they couldn't tell who was driving the car. Initially, Bostrone and Head assumed that maybe some type of emergency had come up with Dorothy's son. But when they had not heard from Dorothy, later that evening, they contacted authorities and reported her missing. At around 4:30 the following morning, Scott's car was discovered, a white Toyota station wagon. It was found in Santa Ana, California, about 10 miles away from the hospital. The car had been set ablaze, and no one was inside. It was about a week later when Dorothy's mother, Vera, received the first phone call asking if she was related to Dorothy Scott. Before Vera could answer, the caller said, "I've got her," and hung up the phone. It was the first such call to be received by Dorothy's family, but it would not be the last. Although police installed a voice recorder at their residence, they never were able to trace a call, as the caller never stayed online long enough. Shortly after the mysterious calls began, Scott's father approached the Santa Ana Register, asking them to run a story about his daughter. The story ran June 12, 1980. And that same day, Pat Riley, the paper's editor, received an anonymous call from someone claiming to be Dorothy Scott's killer. "She was my love," the caller said. "I caught her cheating with another man. She denied having an affair, so I killed her." The caller provided details that had not been previously released to the press. The story of the color of Scott's scarf, as well as the fact that her coworker had been bitten by a black widow spider. The caller also claimed that Scott called him that night from the hospital, although Pam Heard had claimed that Dorothy never left her side. As far as anyone in Dorothy's life was aware, Scott had no serious boyfriend at the time. Still, police believe that the man who called the Santa Ana Register was probably her killer. During all this time, Scott was still missing. It was nearly 2 months later, on August 6, 1984, that a construction worker discovered the charred bones near Santa Ana Canyon. The bones included that of a human and a dog, side by side. Authorities believe that they had been there for some time, as a brush fire had swept through that area in 1982. And that was likely the cause of the charred bones. Though no cause of death was able to be established at the time, a turquoise ring and a watch were both discovered, found with the remains, and the bones were identified as Scott's through her dental records. Though the strange calls stopped in April of 1984, they resumed shortly after Scott's remains were found in August. In spite of the killer's taunting calls, Dorothy Scott's murder remains unsolved until this day. Thank you so much for joining me for yet another episode of SCM MCS Mysterious Crime Stories. I'm your host, T-Rex. Please join me again next week for another show.